And you can still hear me. All is good. And let me shut my phone off so that it doesn't do. I can't kind of help my preferences. Okay, so trends. Where are we? Get on this. Thank you. Let me get this off of my screen. There we go. So these are sort of just random thoughts. I mean, it's summertime. I don't have a major, there's nothing huge going on other than the political conventions, which I really don't want to talk about right now because I think there's too much happening instantaneously to digest as much as I would love to do a textual analysis of various speeches. But we're going to put all that stuff behind us and talk about some things that I think are kind of interesting in terms of the communications and measurement world. The first one is something that I, shall we say, predicted perhaps back in 1999, but everybody thought I was crazy back then, which is this wonderful thing that's happening between integration and between PR and earned media and owned and paid media, and it all coming up in measurement. However, one of the reasons that's happening is that new research from Simply Measure, they did a survey of 350 people, and I'll go into some of the details, but basically, sadly, it basically says that social media is in most cases no longer under the auspices of the PR department, but rather lives within the digital communications or marketing departments. That's going to be, as we were just talking about, that's going to pose huge issues in terms of response time, in terms of just response in general, and so structural issues is how you coordinate, you know, especially in some of these organizations where the digital department might be in a different building. So that's one thing. We're going to talk a little bit about the new integrated AMEC framework. And a couple of interesting new dashboard tools that I've seen that are certainly working hard to make integration of data easier. And a little bit, we'll talk about a little bit more of industry consolidation and what that means for everybody. The other thing that I'm really noticing, especially on the part of partly VPs of digital, CMOs, people like that, I increasingly am hearing people go, I just don't believe this stuff. We'll refrain from using terms like BS, but that's essentially what they're saying. When you're presenting numbers that are just huge, people are being skeptical about them. We'll talk a little bit about that and a little bit about a couple of interesting developments in the tool world relative to tracking visuals and some other new things. I guess actually before we even start, can we just sort of find out, I know that there's some people from universities. Who else is on the call? Can you, or Erin, can you see from the, so I just tailor my conversation a little bit towards whatever the industries are.
And attendees, you can feel free to use the chat box if you don't wish to speak. But yeah, introduce yourselves if you feel like it.
Hi, Katie, and we've introduced ourselves from Kennesaw State University. We have here our VP of Communications and Marketing, that's myself, Arlethea Perry-Johnson. We have our AVP, our Assistant Vice President, Ron Ramos, and our Director of Marketing, Lisa Powelson.
Great, thank you so much. Got anybody else on the line?
Yeah, we actually have Juliet Travis, who's in the tech public relations, and she's based in the Bay Area.
Yeah, hi, I'm Juliet Travis with Liftoff Communications, and I run a boutique agency that focuses on tech startups, and I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. Yeah,
I just saw something from you guys. I don't know what it was, but I think you were, do you do work in the biotech field?
Yes, yeah, we also do work with biotech companies, health tech, biotech. That's correct.
Great. I think I was studying a press release of yours or something.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
I just finished up a major analysis of biotech startup stuff, so that's
okay.
I saw it. And then I just saw we have Shahar? From Israel. I just got a little, there we go. Guy from Media Analysis in Israel. Excellent. I love international folks on this because I hope you will bring a different perspective. So I'm going to close my, where's my video screen? There we go. I shut the video off so we can just have that. And close this and close that and put all these things, and then stop sharing it. There we go. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about integration. So there's this new research that basically says that social media is moving away from the earned and turning increasingly to paid. I would argue that that's a temporary thing. The history of media says that once a media platform becomes paid and gets taken over by conglomerates, the natural human tendency is to go somewhere else. You know, we had websites and forums, and then they got to be all formal and corporate, and so people invented social media. Social media is now becoming all formal and corporate, and people are moving to Snapchat and Periscope and other things, and we'll see where that's all going to go. The other big thing is the new integrated framework. I'm going to show you an example of that in a second. And let's go to that. Okay, come on. There we go. So 5%. This is survey of 350 Marcom and PR professionals and marketing professionals. Asked where does social media live, and 63% is in marketing, which means that it is probably dealing with paid Facebook ads supported by owned, perhaps promoted tweets and owned Twitter accounts. What that's not accounting for, and this survey was not all that specific about who manages the earned, unsolicited, unowned stuff that is just coming in. Now, customer service is in this 15% other category. Many organizations have put social under customer service because it seems to have, frankly, because it seems to have higher ROI when you look at what it saves in terms of customer response times. But I'm frankly very dismayed by this trend because it was something that, you know, the relationships that you can use social media to build are, you know, enormous, and PR is good at building relationships, so it makes me very nervous that this is all moving over to marketing. And please feel free to comment, question, add questions, and we can add that to the discussion. It's sad, but we got to live with it. And basically, what we're going to have to do is build better walls. And I think build better walls, build better forms of communications, fewer walls. And I think one of the things that can bridge that gap is measurement. And if you look at AMEC's new integrated framework, and I did post a long blog, which I'm happy to send to you, about what this does. But the idea here is that it is dramatically moved away from the idea that what you are measuring in PR is media. And if yes, I do want to go there. Please take me there. The way this works is you see that there we go. And we'll walk through this. So it asks you to say, what are your broad objectives of your organization? So that means things like, you know, increase the marketable universe, right? And if you're a university, it might be increase the quality of applicants, or more specific, the average SAT score of applicants. Then it asks you, okay, what are you doing from a communications perspective? What are the objectives of that? So it might be, you know, get messages out. This is where it gets confusing, right? So then you say, okay, what are the inputs? Okay, audience. Okay, I can write down my target audience and give you my strategies. Fine. Now I'm going to measure the activities. You have to tell it whether it's paid, earned, shared, or owned, and I don't think you need all three. I think earned and shared is kind of the same thing, but now you can say, you know, blogging, Periscope, whatever this is, you know, whatever you're actually doing, press releases, you know, press tour, event, whatever that happens to be. And then now you have, this is what I don't even know what this means, but the message here is define it however you want to define it, I think. So this is what you've actually put out there, the actual press releases or the actual white papers or blog posts. Then you're asking for what do you want them to take away from it, what are the actual evidence of results and impact, right? So hopefully it says the same thing you put in the beginning, increased, marketable universe. And you hit submit, and all it really does is frame it. So, do I love this? No. Do I love it because it's a good point of discussion? It's probably the thing you should be taking into senior leadership when you're starting to plan a measurement program, so that you have the alignment on your objectives and you all agree on what these things are. I do the same thing with, I mean, this has a total of 10 different boxes to fill out with multiple things. I think that's too much. I don't think you need all that stuff. Essentially, if you look at my version of a framework is 6 things, and you could probably get it down to fewer than that. I recommend, however, using the concepts, using the questions behind this as a good way to get the conversation going. If you're trying to build out a proper measurement framework and you don't know where to start, not a bad place to start. And frankly, when I went through it, and it made me crazy because it took me all day long to try and fill it out for a client of mine, I would combine inputs and activity and basically do that in one thing. I don't know what the difference is between activity and outputs, but I have output metrics that I use. So I would say that percentage of articles containing key messages would be a measure of your output. It doesn't have that, so it's a little confusing to me. Outtakes are typically measured by surveys. Not everybody can do surveys, so only use that one if you have the ability to do that. I do like the emphasis on outcomes for your department versus impact on the company, but frankly in my framework I combine the two of them. So that's my 5-minute integration to the new introduction to the new AMEC integrated framework. The point is, it's integrating social and traditional and presumably some digital or some web analytics or whatever you put in there as outcomes. So it sort of bridged that gap from how many clips did I generate. This is how some of my clients are actually using these things, and this is where I do get excited, because what we defined as the activity metrics were how many desirable stories, or what we call item count, how many desirable stories were generated and how much engagement was generated. Now, most people would think that lots of items, lots of desirable items, or lots of engagement was a good thing. What I was testing was, does it actually achieve the objective of driving people to the website where they wanted people to go, right? So this is a nonprofit. They wanted people to go to the, donation volunteer pages of their website. So we set up goal conversions for them in Google Analytics. So that's the unique visitors. It actually should be a conversion count. And And so what we were doing here was plotting the unique visitors versus, on the left-hand side, earned traditional media, on the right-hand side, engagement. What that shows you on the left-hand side is not a whole lot of correlation, frankly. And in subsequent discussions, it turns out that no, the PR people were completely divorced from the website people, and they weren't really thinking in terms of driving traffic. And as a result of doing this analysis and showing them that actually there's no correlation between what you do and the desired goal that we're all been working towards, we got to change, either got to change the goal or we have to change the nature of the PR effort. On the right-hand side, there does seem to be, it's a little bit delayed, but there does seem to be a little more correlation between social engagement and visitors. And so we talked through that and how we could possibly make that better in terms of driving it up and making it a little bit more sustainable. So, essentially the story behind some of this was that where we came to this point was the PR guy said, how do you measure a negative? And, we have disasters all the time, and how do you account for that, and how does that factor into measurement? I'm like, well, first of all, you got to define what's bad, right? What is a bad PR disaster? And he described one in which it was truly a failed PR attempt. They had a water buffalo that they had rented or borrowed or whatever to go on to Conan O'Brien to talk about the plight of the water buffalo and how we needed to save the water buffalo habitat. And water buffaloes are, common in the streets of India, and they're fairly passive creatures, but this one took a disliking to Conan O'Brien, and when he got on it, he was supposed to ride it onto the show. Well, it threw him, and so the whole segment got canceled. However, the next day, Conan O'Brien relayed the story about how the water buffalo had attacked him, which was not exactly this charity's key message, and then sort of asked the audience, do you want to see the bruise I got? So he dropped trow, showed the bruise, talked about the water buffalo, and basically said none of the company key messages. So from the PR perspective, it was a complete and total disaster. But I asked the web analytics person what had happened to the website during that time frame and the subsequent 24-hour period afterwards. And she pointed out how during that period, traffic to the website practically doubled. Sign-ups for new memberships went up by 10%. Engagement around the water buffalo fundraising effort went up by about 5%. So as I asked them again, what's bad? What's bad PR? Is that bad PR because you personally were embarrassed? Or is it bad PR because it had a negative effect on the business? Well, it clearly didn't have a negative effect on the business. It had a positive effect on the business. So in a more polite way, I pointed out that the guy should get over his hurt feelings and go on with it and generate more stuff like that that will generate, more conversions in Google. I mean, if you think about, and I hate to even mention this because it's so chaotic and so crazy, but to a certain extent, this is Trump's approach to life, right? Get all the bad press you want to as long as you collect electoral votes, as long as people come out and vote for you and you get the right number of delegates. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of integrating actual digital results to it, because it does change the nature of what everybody has traditionally defined as good press or bad press. This is another one where we looked at the extent to which share of voice mattered for donations, and what we found was that it did, actually, that there was a correlation to share of voice, not just number of articles, but when we were looking at share of voice for two different charities, when our guys got the greater share of voice, it did have an impact on the planned giving and the thank you page for the giving page. So one of the important things in measurement is when you're defining good and bad press, and if you've heard me speak or read any of my stuff about media quality, I'm very I emphasize the fact that when you're defining desirable press, it has to reflect the business goals, right? So presumably, if you define quality press as getting your messages out and having a desirable image out there or having a call to action, however you choose to define good quality media coverage, it should, by nature, if you've done your job right, it should by nature drive conversions to your website, traffic to your website, sales leads, whatever it is that you're trying to get. Actually, there's a wonderful, for the Waukesha State folks, you can, there's a wonderful case study of how these guys did SEO press release for one of the Cal State organizations, I think. Anyway, and they tied it back directly, not to did they like the media coverage or did they not like the media coverage, but did it actually drive applications? And they then justified the investment in PR for that effort by calculating the amount of application revenue they got. And so good was defined as media coverage that drives application revenue. You know, it should integrate with your business results. Further, if you haven't heard about this, so very interesting thing going on. There's a company called Innodata. Oh no, actually, first of all, Karma plus Custom Scoop, my old company, Katie Paine and Partners, merged with Report International, which then merged with Karma, and under the brand Karma has now come Custom Scoop, which is a small another New Hampshire company that has been scraping the media for online news for a number of years. So if you've used Custom Scoop, guess what? You're now a customer of Karma. Innodata is an emerging brand that nobody's ever heard of, but they bought Mediamizer, which was a big Canadian media analysis company. And they just bought Agility, which was part of PR Newswire, which is their PR database. So look for, you know, Cision started it, but everybody is buying everybody else. So we're going to end up with about 3 companies in the industry is my prediction. Let's talk a little bit about this skepticism about the value of media, this trend that I've been seeing, which is basically nobody believes that they're actually measuring return, right? So another survey asked social marketers what's their biggest challenge, and this is not new news, right? Measuring the ROI is always at the top of most of these surveys. Well, first of all, that's because you can't, most of the time you've got poorly defined R for return. Nobody really has spent the time trying to define what the actual return is. Return is supposed to be the actual monetary value. Well, how are you going to get that from a social media campaign that is merged in with a media campaign, you know, a traditional media campaign that's, you know, attribution is very, very difficult these days, and unless you have a very rigorous approach. So I'm going to refer back to the university example, right? So what makes a student apply and ultimately accept and graduate from a university? Well, forget the graduation piece because that's internal stuff, but let's just talk about the application, right? So maybe you've got a paid ad, you know, in an airport someplace, and he's on his way to doing a college tour and sees the ad. At the same time, he's getting a Facebook message from his former high school buddies that are there saying, you got to come, it's a great place to go. At the same time, you're putting stuff out there on Twitter that says, isn't it beautiful in the springtime? How the heck do you know? And his decision is going to be made as much by financial aid and parental influence and counselors at his high school as anything else. So you're not going to be able to attribute a single return from all of that effort. And besides which, even if you did have some way of tracking the actual return in terms of revenue to the organization, The investment piece is all in, which means you have to calculate the cost of the social media, paid digital, PR, all of the recruitment department, all of that stuff, admissions department, all of that all-in costs should be calculated as part of ROI. So it's not surprising that people aren't measuring true ROI. Typically what is being done now is to look at cost effectiveness or cost savings. So if I can get 10 more students to apply to my program via social, and that social program costs me a tenth of what it costs to get them via advertising, then that's cost effectiveness. So when I was working with Atlantic City, New Jersey, for example, the stated outcome goal was to get people to download the visitor guide. And so what I did was we used downloads of the visitor guide. We correlated media quality to it as well as the media spend and the media plan, the paid media plan. And what we showed was that PR was driving downloads of the visitor guide for about a tenth the cost. So, needless to say, when the budgets had to get cut, the paid media was cut and the earned media was kept for actually another year and a half. And to this day, even though Atlantic City is supposed to have gone bankrupt and the program was supposed to have ended about a year ago, for a variety of very funny legislative rulings, it's still going on. And what they're doing is they invest in community events, they invest in social media to spread the word about the events and spread the word about and spread desirable visuals about those events, and therefore the program continues. So one thing is that the reason why people are skeptical about the value of PR and the value of earned media, social media is that nobody's showing it correctly. The other problem is these, and if you use a firm, even TalkWalker, I don't know what TrendKite does, most of these organizations are using some commercial number, and a lot of it is coming out of either Twitter or Facebook. But if you're using a commercial firm to identify quote-unquote impressions or quote-unquote opportunities to see for an online site, chances are it is wildly inaccurate. So what happens is, and this is happening more and more frequently, is people are walking into the chief marketing officer or the board meeting or something and reporting, as I just saw a report that did this, 11 billion people in the U.S. had the opportunity to see my message. And I got to point out to them that there are only 300 million people in America, and of those, most of them don't give a damn about your message. Half of them probably don't have access to the internet or Facebook or Twitter or however you're getting your message across. So ultimately, how are you getting that number? And what they're saying is, oh, well, we're looking at followers of followers on Twitter. The biggest mistake they're making is if you get a story, say, for instance, there's a wonderful, fabulous, message-rich story in the New York Times education section on Waukesha University. It's reaching the site nytimes/education, nytimes.com/education, if you're lucky. However, if you go to Alexa or most of these cheaper services, it will give you the circulation for NewYorkTimes.com. So what you're doing is hugely overinflating the actual reach, and all of these companies do it. It is complete nonsense. I love to point out that the promoters of Miss America, read this in my blog next month, promoters of the Miss America contest, the final result, 7.3 trillion people had the opportunity to see news about the Miss America contest. And I again had to point out there's only 7 billion people on the planet. Half of them don't have internet connection, half of them don't care. And ultimately, you know, the people that they were showing this report to, who had to renew the contract, basically just laughed. They hired me to prove this number was incorrect, which took me about a minute and a half, and said, you know, and besides which, what really mattered was we were trying to drive people into the local businesses, the local restaurants, the local hotels, and guess what? They all reported a decline in services, I mean in customers. So not connected to business results, unrealistic numbers, and you know, and the report, and these visuals are actually sort of taken from personal experience, which is a lot of people send me reports and say, this is what we're currently doing, we need to improve it. And you know, they're thinking, gosh, it's wonderful and I deserve the gold star. The reason why they have to improve it is they sent it to their CMO or their CFO and it came back marked up like this one, stamped complete and utter bullshit. And if you're producing a report that can't pass the sniff test from the chief financial officer, you got to change things around, and you got to make it better. So the CMO understands business results. They do understand web traffic. They do understand goal conversions. They do not understand 11 billion impressions. And my favorite one was 11 billion impressions in England, which actually only has 65 million people. So, you know, none of these things make any sense when you put a little rationale to them. But the companies, the services, the vendors who provide the stuff will tell you, well, that is what it is. Well, then don't don't provide impressions. Don't put bullshit in front of a VP, because it's not going to help you. It's only going to hurt you. So that's how senior leadership sees these reports. Let's talk about some of these new tools. I'm running out of time for questions. So very exciting developments in visual brand tracking. I talked to, I want to say it's Talkwalker yesterday. They've currently got 30,000 brands in their library. They basically are matching literally logos to be able to track organizational logos. Now, it's obviously not cheap to get them to do this, and they wouldn't exactly tell me the price, but they did say it was for their high-end customers. But it raises a very interesting thing that you need to be aware of, which is that when they were giving me their demo, there were lots of mentions, lots of visuals of the Starbucks logo, believe it or not, the DHL logo, FedEx logo, logos like that, where the brand isn't mentioned. And so if your monitoring is looking for the word Starbucks or the word DHL or FedEx or Coca-Cola or whatever, if you're looking for text only and you're not looking for the visual, you're probably missing at least 20% of what is out there on social media. And the reason why Talkwalker has done this is obviously to fill that gap. There are other organizations coming along. There's a lot of commercial APIs out there that are doing this now. It's expensive, I'm sure. It's early days, but it's something that you're going to see a lot more of, because people are realizing that in the social media age, people are communicating more and more and more with visuals. And so if you look at things like Instagram, most tracking of Instagram right now is looking for text, right, is looking for comments. But that's not what's mostly on Instagram. And same thing is true of Pinterest and Snapchat and all these other things. So you really do need a way of looking at logos, but beyond that, emojis, tracking emoji analysis. There's a company out there called Snapalytics that is looking looking at Snapchat and Pinterest. So all of those things are ways people are communicating that are really pretty much not measured by most of the traditional platforms out there. So look for that in the near future. The other thing that's really happening is that more and more of these organizations that I'm dealing with are investing in platforms like Tableau, or trying for firms. TalkWalker is another one. CyberAlert's another one. Firms that can look at other data from your web analytics, from your Salesforce, from whatever your CRM system is, that can bring into a single dashboard all of these other metrics. And I think if you're looking for vendors, if you're out there on the market for services like this, you need to ask them the question, can they accept data from these other services? Because it's hugely valuable to be able to have all of that data in one place. And then there's foreign platforms. That's why I said I'm glad the folks from Israel are here, because increasingly global brands need global monitoring. So, and so do we. Basically everybody does, because if you have any business outside of the U.S., you do need to be able to track your presence on some of these other networks besides Twitter and Facebook. So the more advanced companies are now looking at Weibo and whatever the Facebook equivalent is in Russia, in China, in Brazil, in Latin America, etc. Important development. So those are my sort of interesting new trends that I'm seeing. And what we're going to do now is turn it back over to, let's stop sharing my screen. Stop. Yes. And then that's paused, and we'll put the webcam back up, and feel free to ask me questions, and I'll also be looking for questions on the chat line too. Do we have any questions? And unmute yourself.
So Katie, you mentioned, this is the Kennesaw State team, you mentioned about some of the new trends around measuring the Snapchat and also the kind of the visual, the logos. Can you speak to the benefits? I thought I heard you say that we're losing about a 20% loss on the table if you're not measuring those visuals, doing that visual tracking.
Yeah, it depends. Well, about that 20% is highly qualified. It depends what you're putting out there, right? So if you're an old fart like me and struggle to, thank God for Aaron, struggle to find visual ways of communicating stuff about measurement, probably 90% of what I put out there is text, which is easily findable by all of these various services. If what your program entails is a lot of video or a lot of visual or a lot of, user-generated video or user-generated visuals, then it probably is as high as 20%. And what really, it's in the early stages. It's going to get, I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. There's a number of very exciting technologies that probably haven't made it into all the commercial rounds. I know CyberAlert's got something in the works, and TalkWalker is doing it, and somebody else is doing it. I can't remember who else. There's one other company out there that's doing it. And what they're really looking for is you teach your computer what your image looks like, and it goes out there and finds it. It's a lot like, Google is basically behind a lot of this stuff. So if you have a logo, the easiest thing to do is track logos. Emojis are being tracked now by a number. Simply Measured, I think, is doing emojis too. So it's just, you have a library of emojis or a library of images, and you teach the computer to go out there and look for it. That's basically the state of the art right now.
Gotcha.
The value of it is if that's, if that's the bulk of your social media effort, probably worth the investment to track it. If it's not, wait for the prices to come down.
Thank you.
It will, I'm sure.
We are considering, well, not considering, we're in the process of having a full-time in-house videographer in order to push a lot of video content to enhance our SEO presence. And it sounds like that would be an appropriate investment to correlate with the investment of a videography program.
It would be, but I'm also going to show you something, I think. Let me see if I can find this if I can find this quickly, I will do this. Where was it? I know what I used it for. PowerPoints. Tell me there. Okay, good. I'm going to tell you this little story because be careful about that investment and test it. I realize you're probably already committed to it, but hang on a second. Let me see if I can share this again. So this is what I'm about to describe to you. There we go. Okay, tell me what screen. I'm going to turn this off. You see something that says Beckham photo?
Yes, we do. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when we first went into UNICEF, they had an enormous investment in videography and in photography, right? Because obviously, how do you tell stories about, children in trouble in foreign countries, but you have video? Mm-hmm. So we initially started up at the beginning of the year. So if you look at this, the middle of this chart with January 1/5/2012, that is when all of their very, very, very expensive beautiful, first baby of the year, gorgeous photographs taken at great expense in Africa and places like that, and videos of kids in Syria and heartbreaking stuff. And it might work very well. We were not measuring against the objective of fundraising. We were measuring against the objective engagement. So bear that in mind. What we found, as you can see, is they said, well, you know what? We're really curious about that effort we did with David Beckham, one of our celebrities. And we were noticing that there's a lot of engagement in UNICEF celebrities anyway, but it was mostly, happy birthday, Serena Williams. They then said, we don't care about that. We really care about is getting our messages across. So with David Beckham, our messages were just generalized awareness of what was going on in Syria, and that there was I can't remember if this is whether it was Syria or something else, but making people aware of the potential, humanitarian crisis in Syria. Mm-hmm. And we got David Beckham to talk about it. So go back into December to see what happened. So that was a video that they did with David Beckham and Dierks Bentley, and designed to talk about this emerging thing. And as you can see, it got a tremendous number of likes and a big lift in shares. We then said, okay, so what happened with over here, what happened in February? Well, that was when Mia Farrow went to Africa. And what they got out of that was incredible communication of key messages, not as much engagement, but people saying, UNICEF really are the experts. You may want to help. If you want to help, support UNICEF. They know what they're doing. That's their key message. So Mia Farrow cost them very little, because she was going to go there anyway, and it was sort of already done. Beckham was a little bit more expensive, but neither one of those cost anywhere close to all the stuff that they were doing in January with videos and photography. Lesson learned, right? Define your objectives first and test to see whether they're achieving, because all the beautiful visuals in photography were shared, but not shared with UNICEF as the expert, or here's our message of the day. It was, here's a beautiful photograph, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the investment needs to be balanced against the desired return, and if you can keep that in mind and just sort of continuously test. So back to your question about the visual tools, visual tracking tools, that is certainly a way. The only way you're going to be able to track video is through tags at this point. Nobody's actually doing real video tagging, but everybody out there can probably track, certainly CyberAlert can, and Simply Measured can, and I can check and see whether some of these other guys do. Everybody tracks YouTube, but they're just tracking the tags. They're tracking text tags that are attached to the video. So you will be able to track that anyway if you're using. Are you using any kind of social media tracking now?
Yes, we are. We should use Hootsuite and what else? Hootsuite and then just our whatever analytics comes with that particular.
So you can, I mean, you can either just track it on YouTube, or you can track it. Everybody can track. Probably most people can track YouTube now. So yeah, definitely track engagement on YouTube, but develop an efficiency score, because what you want to look at is, okay, so you know, what's the cost per engagement? You know,
Yes.
look at the cost of generating, you know, of doing an event and a hashtag, or doing, you know, a blog post that you're sending out there versus the video. So you're looking at cost per engagement, so you know whether it's worth the investment.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. And clearly we would align the video production with video goals if it's to enhance the visibility of our research, for example, or
Yes.
the caliber of students that we're trying to attract in terms of SAT scores or GPAs or whatever. So we would have those kind of goals aligned with production of the video content.
Right. So one of the interesting things, when we were working with Georgia Tech, we were looking at visuals. We were looking at, what were we looking for? I think we were looking at Facebook, visuals on Facebook. And we qualified, one of the things, our definition of, you know, high levels of engagement for them was sharing video with a comment. And what we found was that Stanford absolutely blew everybody away, A, because it's a beautiful campus, but B, look at me, here I am, I'm really here at Stanford, and, you know, Stanford's got those classic, you know, terracotta roofs. I mean, it's a very distinctive look, especially in the quad area. So everybody at graduation, everybody, all the freshmen, everybody would have their picture taken against the backdrop of the Stanford campus saying, look at me, I'm here at Stanford. Now, no offense to Georgia Tech. It's a nice campus, but it doesn't, it shows off the things that it's most proud of is the high-tech center, which basically looks like a street in downtown San Jose, or it's sports, you know, or it just doesn't, you know, the things that it's known for, the engineering, the robotics, they got good visuals of robotics, but they don't have stuff that people are going to take selfies in front of.
Yeah, iconic landmarks.
Yeah, so either create a place that creates something that people want to take selfies in front of. And you'll save a lot of money. Yeah, seriously. I mean, you know, if you create something that or something fun that people want to take selfies in front of, that's going to generate more engagement than you know, a lot of other things. Robotic videos generate a lot of engagement. That's the other thing I know. But be very, very careful. You haven't heard me tell this story. Be careful what you wish for. My friend at UC Davis told me, I went out there and I did a whole workshop for them to define their metrics. And the VP said, well, my definition of success is a viral video. Now, I don't know if you remember what UC Davis is famous for, but there was this little incident with a pepper spray of the protesters.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, he got his viral video all right.
He sure did.
He sure did.
Yeah, almost brought down the president, and she's still in trouble.
She's still in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I actually did just covered her in my Image Patrol column a couple months ago. Because she hired a PR firm to try to fix it.
Yeah, and to scrub the internet.
Yeah, yeah, that always works.
Yeah.
First of all, most people immediately find out whether you're trying to do that. That's the thing that's hysterical.
Yeah. Well, in public records, open records for a public institution,
Yeah.
That has to be disclosed.
Yeah.
Crazy. Well, thank you. That was insightful and instructive, Katie. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. We got a few more minutes. Any other questions?
I have a question, Katie.
Yes.
This is Ron Ramos here from Kennesaw State.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, when you think about marketing and marketing analytics, marketers are really trying to understand their customers. In our case, we've got various customers, but students is a primary customer for us, or audience for us. And there's a lot of talk and movement towards understanding personas and understanding the customer journey and their experience and tracking that analytically to really understand what their behaviors are on a cross-platform basis.
Yep.
So it could be on a tablet or a laptop or on their phone, and really identifying that it's the same person that may be on Facebook and Twitter and maybe visiting your site, and collecting that data to really understand your customer. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the thing that I think it's very valuable. I think it's very valuable for folks like Target and Walmart and Home Depot, where you've got millions and millions of interactions. I think on a smaller scale basis, if you don't have large quantities of interactions, so here's basically what the problem is. So I don't know how much activity you guys have in terms of those interactions, but if you're trying to find a person who loves robotic competitions, that lives in an area with good high schools, that spends time on Snapchat, and also has a cat, you're going to get down to too small a population of people very quickly. So some of the deep dive analytic stuff just is not relevant unless you have hundreds and hundreds of interactions, millions and millions of interactions. I do, however, think personas and identifying personas is an excellent, excellent exercise, and I think more people should do it, and more people should tie metrics to those personas. So many people will say to me, oh, well, my goal is, reach 1 million women between the ages of 18 and 35. Well, that's not really telling you very much, because first of all, I mean, if your goal was, if you told me that your goal was to reach, 10 million women between the ages of 18 and 35, I'd say, well, okay, so once you've reached them, and they're all, well, 18 and 35 is probably a little old for your demographics, but, great, now they all apply, now what, right? You don't want all of them. You want ones with certain demographic and financial and SAT scores and everything else. So when you, I think you do that, I think it's wonderful stuff, but what you're really trying to do is narrow it down so that you can write emails to them and write letters to them. And you've got to have the infrastructure and the commitment and stuff like that, but that was the original brilliant marketing thing that Texas A&M, isn't that where the former secretary is? Is Texas A&M or, yeah, it's Texas A&M. So Texas A&M used their data to identify students in high school with above average grades that were related to alumni of Texas A&M. Those people got individual letters signed by William Gates, the former Secretary of Defense, and I think current president of the university. Personal letters, all hand signed, right? Because they were able to identify the 1,000 of them that were out there. And at the same time, the father got one, if it was whoever the alumni was that was the relation, also got them. So that kind of targeting is brilliant. Mm-hmm. Absolutely brilliant. And some school is, the other thing that I heard the other day was some school, in order to increase the acceptance rate, had identified the people that they wanted, and actually the president called them up. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, how many of your ideal students do you want? You could make 500 phone calls if you knew that those were the kids that you really wanted, that they had the highest statistically the highest chance of completing and paying, full tuition. You could do that. So I think it's hugely valuable from a micro marketing standpoint. Not let's mass market them and mm-hmm. do a bunch of stuff on Snapchat because that's where they are. I think micro-targeting is where it becomes enormously valuable. And of course, at some point it'll be overused and then it won't be valuable at all anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant.
Thank you.
That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Looks like it's time.
Yeah, one more question. If you have one more question, we can take one more.
Okay. I think you're clearly.
I have one more question for you,
yeah.
Katie. You reviewed some of the information with us in reference to the ROI for PR versus, and I'm not quite sure that you meant versus marketing or not, but one of the ways I kind of look at the marketing tools at our disposal is not just the paid digital, but also those organic leads that we get from. So we would have a paid campaign go out, but then also in-house we would have our social media specialists develop organic posts that are derived from the content or maybe the objective of the campaign, and then they would engage in our audience with that in that format as well. And then when we actually look at the analytics, we don't look at just the sessions because that's like looking at impressions, which is okay. So what we really do is look at the unique visitors and then then we narrow it from there to have a deeper understanding of where they came from, how long they looked at the ad, that's a big driver, or the video, or if they skipped it. Those are some of the other drivers that we try to look at because, we can't measure that impact of the complete impact of the video. Like there's no eye tracking, so we don't know really what they looked at on a page or what they didn't look at on a page. So, have you seen examples where that is, where that's beneficial instead of being siloed where you have PR and then you
so here's the easiest. I mean, you used Google Analytics already, correct?
Right.
So, do you set up goal conversions?
Yes, on some of our campaigns we do, absolutely.
Okay, so set up a specific goal conversion, test out the theory, but basically, my favorite metric in all of Google Analytics, not my favorite, there's a number of them, but so I've got a bunch of, we've got a bunch of different, I have, probably 10 different goals set up based on what I want them to do. You know, invite me to speak is, you know, and I put different values and weightings on them, but, you know, goals for inviting me to speak or giving me their email address or subscribing to the newsletter or buying something or all of those different things. But then the first thing I look at is where do they come from, right?
Yeah.
So
That's exactly what we do.
9% come from our social network, and what I probably would like to do is see that over time. But to me, that's hugely valuable, is to know that. Now, can I get more detail? I can't remember if I can get more detail on this or not. I don't think I can without a little bit more effort. But what I'm trying to do is, if I do more social, do conversions go up? And so we track this over time to see if it's paying off. And I'm not, I would say that my hunch is, Erin can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but my guess is the fact that it is going up over time, mostly because we factor in LinkedIn.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is just in conversion sake, and just make sure that you can, you know, that you've got goal conversions set up for your organic stuff. I mean, it's great to look at organic search on this, but what you really want to know is if something comes in, so you can see for us, I can't remember how many goals I have set up, too many probably, but so there are 9 for, you know, that are all, you know, properly weighted and everything else. But each one of those, so when Erin does a paid promoted tweet, it gets a new conversion. It gets a conversion tag. And if we do something special on, you know, on the Facebook page or anything else, we set that up ahead of time so that I know that it's coming from that effort.
Okay, I think that's what we're doing. So I think that
Yeah, then you're doing it. Yeah, then that's great. I mean, you know, that's the best way right now that I know of to do attribution, frankly. And I know people who have, I mean, you know, the fascinating thing is if you know, you go back up to this and you can see like Atlantic City, New Jersey, and PBS and stuff. PBS are the experts on this stuff. I mean, they have such cool goal conversions set up. I get lost in them. But, you know, some good Google Analytics expert, you know, can set these things up so that you really do know exactly what's happening and what's coming in from everywhere. So for instance, for PBS, what we're doing, part of their goal conversion is obviously digital downloads and digital engagement with their program. So I can tell them exactly which. In fact, that's my next thing. So do this afternoon. Exactly which PR efforts are generating the most conversions in terms of engagement.
Yeah, the only time we have an issue with that is when we are promoting it like an advertorial or an editorial outside, but we're still part of that. It's part of our campaign, and then on that external site, there's actually activity happening, whether it be shares or likes or retweets, whatever the case may be. Then we can't see that. The only way we can see that is contact that third party and ask them for those analytics, and sometimes that information is more significant than we find internally. So
exactly. If you have access, I ran into that in the pharma world a lot, because they would do these partnerships with nonprofits groups, right, like breast cancer folks or psoriasis folks or whatever, you know, the Psoriasis Society or whatever would do a big thing, and all the traffic would go there. That was the intent. But what I said was, when you go to those third party, especially if for them it was easier, because obviously these guys were getting support and financial support and, you know, promotional support. The nonprofit was getting promotional support from the sponsor. basically I said to the sponsor, go make it requirement. You got to give us your data.
Right.
So if you're in a situation where you're partnering with somebody, just make that part of the contract. It's no big deal.
Yeah. Thank you. Great
You're
feedback.
welcome. I hope that was helpful. And I'm sorry I kept everybody over, but we were having a good conversation, so why not?
Thank you so much for being generous with your time, and we learned a lot today.